setting realistic expectations, and then after I'm done, you'll stay, and Mary Scott will be talking about dementia. And then after that, some of you may stay or go depending on your schedules, and then Christina Wildrick will be talking about fall prevention. So I'm the administrator in the Mennonite home. So what does setting realistic expectations mean? So it means that the resident and the family understand the services we do and don't provide. They understand the potential outcomes for their family member. And the staff and the family, we're all on the same page in our understanding of what's going to happen. So trust is earned by our words and actions. And it is in our benefit and the residents' benefit to have a trusting relationship with our residents and families. And what that means is that we're all on the same page, we anticipate their needs, we're proactive, so we're not waiting for problems, we're anticipating situations and addressing them before something happens as much as possible. And we communicate so there aren't surprises. So for example, when Charlene does admissions, talks to families prior to admission or to the discharge planners, she explains that we do not have private rooms in the Mennonite home. Yes, we have 4 right now, but they're always occupied, so we just say we don't have any. Because we've had sometimes people show up and they think that they're going to be having a private room, and here they're sharing a room with another person plus sharing a bathroom with 3 other people. Charlene also talks to them about that the level of care we provide is not one-on-one care. Because if families come in and expect that level of care, they're going to be upset. So medical records, and Charlene provide a lot of information, both pre-admission and post-admission to families and residents. So what are some unrealistic expectations that families have? What do you guys think after you saw the screen? Yeah. Anything else besides falls? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, ta-da. Okay. So since we've started setting realistic expectations for a few years ago, we have improved on this significantly. And in the past, and still sometimes, so we always talk about it with families, they think that once they walk through the magic doors of the Mennonite home, that their resident, their relative who falls at home all the time is no longer going to fall once they come through the Mennonite home door. Well, we know that that's not realistic. So what we explain to families is that we can do some things to try and prevent a fall and to prevent the severity of injury, but we cannot promise you that your loved one is not going to fall and injure themselves. And so Charlene goes over that with the families, pre-admission medical records when they arrive, and then the resident care managers also review that. Sometimes for our residents who admit for rehab for short-term care, they've been in the hospital for a period of time, they've gotten used to that level of care, and so they figure, well, that's the level of care that we provide. Well, we know that that's not, because we're under different regulations, different policies, we have different staffing than the hospital has. Another thing we occasionally hear is that, well, I don't understand why you're taking me off Medicare. It says in my Medicare manual that they'll pay for 100 days, or my doctor told me. And so Charlene goes over that pre-admission and medical records post-admission, explaining that people have to meet Medicare criteria, we review it weekly, and explain that whole process. And I would say we don't hear that as much anymore, maybe, as we used to. Another thing is sometimes a family can have preconceived ideas that, well, the person's coming to the Mennonite home, so you're going to fix her. Well, it may be that mom was requiring a one-person assistance with her mobility and all her ADLs while she was living with her daughter, She went in the hospital with a fractured hip, and then she's coming to the Mennonite home. And so we're going to get her back to being a person who can walk on her own and do all her own care. Well, we all know that if you weren't like that before your fractured hip, you're not going to be like that after. And so that's why communication is important as well, from like the therapist and the RCMs and nurses and social services, in explaining this is what your mom was like before, this is what happens with a fractured hip, this is what you're kind of looking at. So from the get-go, they have more of an idea. Now that doesn't mean that they truly accept that always, but the more we can communicate with people, the better. So what do we do to have residents and families have realistic expectations? Any ideas? Okay. Yes, we talk with them. So the things that we do that help are having good first impressions. So when they walk in the door, Alana's there to greet them, or on the weekend, Alicia or Vesper are there to greet them. We provide excellent customer service, that's our goal. So when they're here getting a tour with Charlene, you know, they're seeing the wonderful interactions between you and the residents. Another thing is communication, and you'll hear me talk about communication through this whole thing. So when somebody's in the dying process or when they go on to hospice, a lot of what nursing staff does and social services and the chaplains is provide education and communicate with them about what to expect. Because having a family member who's in the dying process, it's very scary. And you don't know, well, what is this? They're doing this. What does this mean? Or what does this mean? And so the more we can communicate with them, and that's just one example, then that helps them not to be as fearful because they know why that's happening. Also, we do not make promises we cannot keep. So, you know, for example, Charlene, in a sense, being a marketing person in a way, you know, some other places will make promises they can't keep because they want to fill their beds no matter the cost, no matter if they can meet the people's needs or not. And so sometimes a marketing person in one of those settings, not here, would say something, you know, like, oh, well, no, your mom will never fall. We'll take care of her. Oh, yeah. How long does it take to answer a call light, they ask. Oh, well, it's always just, you know, 2 minutes. So we don't make promises we can't keep just to make a family member or a resident who might be coming here feel good and to fill a bed. Okay, so good first impressions help build trust and confidence. And that's everybody's job, you know, from dining, when the person's new here, making them feel welcome, which you guys do. Same with housekeeping, maintenance, it's everybody's job. We talked about reception. The first 72 hours are really critical, you know, because they don't know us. You know, nursing homes are these big, terrible places. They're fearful because they don't know what to expect. You know, their mom was living independently in her home, and now maybe she's had a stroke and she can't communicate or take care of herself. And so we have to earn their confidence and their trust. And like we talked about earlier, the way we do that is we anticipate the residents' needs. We are proactive. We're checking on them frequently while we're getting to know them. We're communicating about what to expect. Because I can tell you personally, if we get off on the wrong foot with a person, sometimes, and it's not a good impression that they receive, I can tell you that sometimes we will never get to the point where they truly trust us. And their stay usually involves lots of upset people, lots of meetings, a lot of time. So that first 72 hours from when they arrive is really critical, and that's all of our jobs. So, you know, if you're needing to help somebody out of the car, their family members brought them, know why the person's here. Make sure you know what time your admissions are coming to your floor as much as possible, so that when the person is wheeled in from transport, they don't hear, oh, I didn't know we were getting an admission. Oh, who's this? Because how would that make you feel if you were the person coming in? What I generally hear is just the opposite. So, and whether it's real or not, what a family perceives as happening and occurring, that's their reality. So again, if their impression isn't good, their perception is we probably don't provide good care. So again, with all these things, we're trying to eliminate problems before they occur. So excellent customer service makes people feel welcome and comfortable. We've been talking about it builds trust and confidence, and it applies to interaction with everybody, visitors, families, residents, coworkers. So what's the impact of poor customer service? Well, like I just said, perception is reality for the family. People question, well, do they really know what they're doing here? I've gotten this answer from this person and this answer from that person, and that person says they don't know, and this person wouldn't even talk to me. So it builds distrust, so that when we are communicating with them some information about their family member, in the back of their mind, they may be thinking, oh, well, yeah, sure, they're saying that. So that's why, again, first impressions are really important, and we're doing all these things that we're talking about related to good customer service. And like I said, it's difficult and very time-consuming to overcome. So some examples of poor customer service are, if you're going into the room and you haven't ever met the resident, or there's a new family member, don't just walk in and start giving care, which I know you don't do, but introduce yourself to the resident, introduce yourself to the family member. Things like, he's not my resident. Oh, that's not acceptable. Or I don't know. Now, it's okay to not know. I learn something new every day almost, and I've worked here 23 years. But then what would you say after you say, well, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. Okay, it is never acceptable. It violates resident rights, which violates our compliance code, to say we are short. And that's something that I am not accepting of at all. Because what does it do to a resident when you say we're short? Right, it scares them, it's frightening, and what are they supposed to do with that information? It's like, oh, well, are they gonna be able to come and help me? Am I gonna get the help I need? Well, maybe I should get up and go to the bathroom on my own, and then they fall. And I understand as a caregiver why you say that, because you're you're feeling rushed. You wanna make them feel good. And so you're trying to give an explanation of why it may be taking longer than it normally would. But we don't say that. I would say, I'm sorry it's taking me so long. So, does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So also, sometimes you don't have to say a word, but your body language can say a lot. So, if you're slumping down the hall or into the room, you're not smiling, you have a frown on your face or a flat affect, you appear bothered, you roll your eyes when somebody asks something. Does that make a resident feel very good? No. So even if you're feeling this way, you need to keep yourself in check. And I can tell you sometimes I don't smile going down the hallway, but it's something I consciously try to do. But when I go in a resident room, I would not be appearing this way. Doesn't matter if you've been in the room 10 times, the resident's asking the same thing, or they may be a resident who has lots of ideas of things that they need right away. We don't roll our eyes. We don't make them feel like they're a bother. And we need to follow through on what we say we'll do, because if we don't, that's poor customer service. So arguing with a resident or a family member when they're sharing a concern, don't argue with them, because in their mind, they're correct. So just listen to them, nod your head, let them vent. When they're done, say, I'm sorry you've had this experience, I understand, and then kind of rephrase what they've said. And then, for example, if you're a CNA or your housekeeper, laundry, maintenance, dining, say, I'm going to go get my supervisor, or I'm going to go get the nurse and have them come and talk to you. Because if you argue with them, it's only going to make it worse. So let's talk about something nice, like excellent customer service. Okay, so excellent customer service makes people feel special. But to do that, we need to focus on the person, really listen to hear them talking, which sometimes that can take a lot of effort. Because I know sometimes when I'm talking to someone, I find my thoughts going, okay, well, they're talking, but I know I need to do this, I need to do that. And then all of a sudden I realize, oh, I don't think I heard what they said. So we do have to pay attention. Smiling and having a positive attitude. Like we talked about, introducing yourself, and if you don't know, find out, things like that. If a family or resident needs something, it's in your scope of your job, just go ahead and take care of it. And a really important one is you need to know your residents. You need to get to know them so you can anticipate their needs. And you guys do an excellent job of that. Okay, so effective communication. Effective communication begins with setting realistic expectations for care and services, like we've talked about, for potential residents and families before residents even admit here. So ways that we do that are the pre-admission process and the admission. Charlene spends a lot of time with family members, with discharge planners, with residents, prior to them even arriving, making sure that they understand what we can do and can't do. Medical records, I would say, spends a half an hour to an hour with each family member when they're doing admission paperwork. Therapy explains things, discharge planning, care conferences, notification of changes, and ongoing communication. So if we communicate effectively, families are going to be more satisfied, they're going to trust us more, and we're going to have good outcomes. If we don't, families don't know what to expect, which leads to fear and distrust, like we've talked about. They assume we're not competent. They think staff are not being truthful in the information they give. And when something bad happens, like they have a fall and they fracture their hip, or they fall and they have a bleed in their brain, if they already think that we don't know what we're doing and they don't trust what we're saying, when we call on the phone and say, I need to tell you, that this has happened to your mom, they are more likely to not believe us and have confidence in our services and that we were caring for their mom. They're going to think that maybe we're not telling the truth. And so in those cases, that can affect our reputation. If they go to the hospital, if they're unhappy with us, they're most likely going to tell a lot of people there that they're unhappy with us and why, which affects our reputation. It affects the time in trying to win their trust again, and it can impact our finances. And if we get sued, that's money that we're having to spend somewhere that otherwise we could spend on services here. Or maybe if it's affecting our reputation, we don't have as many admissions. So setting realistic expectations, having good customer service, it's quite important. So again, like we've talked about, if a resident or a family has a complaint, you stand there, you take it, you listen, you nod your head, You're making eye contact with them. You say, I'm sorry you've had this experience. I'm going to go get my supervisor. And then when the supervisor comes, let's say the charge nurse, she's going to do the same thing. And then she's going to say, well, I just want to let you know that we're going to investigate this and find out what happened. And then we will be getting back to you to let you know what our investigation found out. And it's really important if you as a CNA or go into a room and you're listening to a complaint, you go get the nurse, and the nurse says, well, I have to go give somebody their blood sugar, then I'll come back down. It's really critical that you go back to that family member and say, you know, I've told the nurse she has to do one other thing, but then she will be down. Because otherwise they're going to assume that you didn't tell anybody or you told somebody and they didn't care to come down. So it's critical to finish that loop of communication. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, thanks for coming. Mary's going to give her presentation on dementia.
Oh, now I can sing. Sweet. Two different things. I'll try not to move around so this doesn't, I lose it. Okay, so this year I decided to kind of take a different course and talk just about the approach. And so we're going to talk about it's all in your approach. So what is dementia? It's a chemical change in the brain as well as a structural change. So what actually happens in the brain when people get dementia is the brain literally shrinks in size. The brain cells die, and as the brain cells die, the mass of the brain shrinks. And there is less neurotransmitters going from cell to cell, and this is how cells talk to each other with a neurotransmitter, that chemical. And so with those going away, the cells don't have as much communication with each other. So those chemicals help the brain with memory. Some days are good and some days are bad. Some days there's so much confusion for the resident going through this that their frustration level is pretty high, and that's our job kind of to figure out what's going on. And that's not always easy. And one of the things that's really clear is dementia is not a mental illness. A lot of people think it is. So we just want to make sure people understand that it's not. So these are the most common ones we see, and there's over 65 different types of dementia out there. Alzheimer's disease is the #1 type of dementia currently. It is a gradual, slow decline from beginning to end, and it can last from 3 to 20 years. I can't even imagine 20 years with no memory and still functioning. And then vascular dementia is the second one we see. And we're seeing a lot more people moving in with vascular dementia, the person with all the mini strokes or the multiple strokes. It's more of a stair-step decline. They kind of plateau, and then when they decline, they decline. And then they plateau again, and then they decline some more. So it's more of a stair-step. In a recent study at OHSU with advanced MRI imaging, most of those with Alzheimer's diagnosis had some element of micro multi-infarcts in their brain as well. So they can have, some both inside the brain that we don't necessarily always know about. The treatment for us is still the same. The care is still the same. Lewy body dementia is probably the most misdiagnosed dementia out there. A lot of times people are diagnosed with Parkinson's first because they're so rigid. And then along comes the dementia part, and they're like, oh, wow, maybe this is not Parkinson's. And so what ends up happening is that now they're getting a lot better diagnosis for Alzheimer's, for Lewy body disease, because they have better testing. But along with Lewy body disease, they have a lot more hallucinations. They have a really poor gait. They're more unsteady. A lot of times they'll lean to one side, either by sitting or in their mobility. And then they also have a hard time holding on to things with Lewy body disease. Frontal lobe dementia is probably the most typical type of dementia out there, and it's because this part of our brain is our the emotional part of our brain. So when the brain cells are dying up here, all those emotions kind of go out the window, and people will say and do things that they really don't care about. They're very disinhibited, so they'll curse and swear and call you names, but it's because this part of the brain, they can't pull back their words once they're gone. They don't care what they say. So it's really challenging, and because there's over 18 different types of frontal lobe dementia, sometimes it takes a lot more diagnosing to figure out what that is. Alcohol-induced dementia, people who have been heavy drinkers their whole life, and by the time they get their 65, their brain cells are fried. That's a frontal lobe dementia. So there's multiple kinds of, it's the most difficult type to care for, person. Oops, back. But with all dementia, all of us, who might interact with the person, we need to know how to interact, how to have the right approach, how to make that connection, and add another piece to that puzzle so there is a connection. And that's our goal when we're working with people with dementias. How do we connect with them? How can we build that connection to have a conversation or an interaction that goes well? And it takes time. Unfortunately, we sometimes don't get it right, but it's purely by accident. We don't get up in the morning and say, you know what, I think I'll tick off Mrs. Smith today by what I say to her. I mean, we don't do that. And so it's sometimes whatever comes out of our mouths just by accident, they'll hear it wrong and we'll be in a conflict. The person with dementia, they can't change. They can't change their trajectory of their disease, so we have to change. We have to be maybe somebody they need us to be. We have to be maybe kinder when they're meaner, just because that's where they are right now. We often might say to ourselves, oh, they know what they're doing. They're doing that on purpose. Have you ever caught yourself thinking that? I have, and that was a long time ago. But because with dementia, they can no longer think like that. They can't get up and have an action plan of pulling the red fire, I don't have any in here, the fire alarms. They can't wake up in the morning and plan that out. Totally, they can't. We had a resident who did that at a place I did, and she just walked around all day. Every now and then, she'd just pull the red. We kept thinking, you know what? She's doing that on purpose. But she couldn't plan that out. So there's some basic things we should do, and there's some things we should not do. We need to know how to interact better, and we get better at it the more we do it. And then the more we know about that resident and that person, the better our approach can be. The more we can build that intimate connection because it's something that they'll know. So this is a normal brain and an Alzheimer's brain, and I choose to have the one on the left because I would like to have a normal brain forever. But an Alzheimer's brain, because the brain cells are dying, it shrinks, and the abilities that were once real strong and prominent are going away. So things that they did really, really well are slowly going away. And what ends up happening is we lose the information on the left side of our brain, which is all of that sequencing and things like that. And all the stuff that we retain to the end is on the right side of our brain, which is rhythm and music and cuss words. And so those are the things that we can use to the end of their life cycle, is all the stuff on the right side of the brain. And everybody goes through the disease differently. There's no two people who are exactly alike. So memory is the first thing to become a challenge. Forgetting what happened yesterday and sometimes 5 minutes ago. And so why could that be a challenge when somebody is in dining? They forget what they ordered. And when you bring it to the table, they're like, I didn't order that. What'd you bring me that for? I want blah, 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 blah. And it totally could happen. So again, it comes back to that approach, what we should do in that instance. So in forgetting important dates, asking the same information over and over and over again, difficulty with concentration, taking much longer to do things you used to do quicker, more sticky notes everywhere to help you get through your day, forgetting to pay bills because they come in, you just throw them on a table, or you pay bills more often, all the time. You're paying the same bill over and over and over because, oh, a bill, I got to pay it. Or I get now, I get a ton of stuff in the mail for contributions. And someone with dementia might just keep sticking a check in there and paying those contributions and donating to everybody who sends them something. So that can be real challenging for their bank account. So understanding what we are saying, learning and understanding starts in the hippocampus of the brain. So we perceive with our eyes, we see, and it goes all the way back and goes to the hippocampus to get it stored into long-term memory. So, but the hippocampus is the first place that, where brain cells die. And there's over 10,000 connections with other neurons in the hippocampus itself. But when that dies, all that information that's going in is just going nowhere. It's not getting stuck in that file that you need it to get stuck in. Folks can still hear sounds, but they may not understand the word behind the sound. So when a buzzer goes off, they might think it's a doorbell or a telephone. Misinterpret the word you are saying. Once I said, "Do you want a hug?" And the resident said, "You're on drugs." So they totally misinterpreted what I was saying, and I could not stick around there because I would have got smacked. And we need to not use slang language because they have no idea what slang language is. We have to be very clear and concrete. Speaking, people can't find the right words. They try to figure out what this is, and they're looking at a spoon, and they may not be able to figure out that this is a spoon. Sometimes they can talk about it. This is something you put in here, and then you put it in your mouth. They may be able to do that. Word salad is very, very prominent in mid to end stage dementia, and people, they have their own language. And so we have to try to figure out, what are they trying to tell us? What are they trying to say? So they will describe the item sometimes. Vague or made up language, that's going to be me, making up all kind of words that they know what it is, but nobody else does, and we just have to try to figure that out. And then single phrases. We had someone once who had a cuss word that was her single phrase. And one time a lady would say, "Fine as frog hair," all the time, for everything. Everything you did, "Oh, fine as frog hair." I mean, that was just her coined phrase all the time. So approach, which is kind of what we're going to talk about. Think about the best customer service you've ever had in your entire life. Where were you? Were you at a restaurant? Were you at Les Schwab? Les Schwab gives great customer service. Were you at on a Disney cruise ship? Was it at a department store, the doctor's office, the dentist's office? Where was it? Someone just yell out a good customer service experience. Where? At a resort? They treated you really well? Yeah, good. And how did it make you feel? Make you feel good that they would call you by name or offer you another cocktail or, oh, get your towel for you or whatever. It made you feel kind of nice, worthy. So think about a bad customer service experience that you had. I could tell you one, but I'm not gonna. I did it last time in dining. But that you remember them forever and ever and ever and ever, and you won't let it go. You remember the negative stuff longer. So what did they do right? What did they do wrong? That's what we need to do with the residents we serve. It's customer service to them on how we do our approach. So approach is just good customer service to our residents. We need to listen better so we can respond a little more appropriately. We may hear one thing and it could mean something totally different. And we just you get to learn to know the resident and their background and their history and some of their quirks. And then you could respond in a way that would be a positive response. People remember the feelings of a bad experience longer than the feelings of a good experience. So you could remember those situations maybe sometimes where you had a song in your head and you can take yourself back to that day. Even if it was a negative experience, you can remember that as well. People with dementia truly believe what they believe. They truly believe it right now, wherever they are. That is the God's truth. And you can't change their mind. We've got a couple situations going on right now over there that's what's happening. And you got to play into their world whatever way you can finagle in so that you can be on the same page with them. They can't come to us and change and be on our page. We have to be on their page. So it takes a lot of therapeutic fibbing and just letting go of the real world and being a part of that kind of acting world. So if we disagree with them or tell them they are wrong, what could happen? They're going to what? You're going to get angry and they might hit you, they might bite you, they might kick you, they could do all of those things because in their mind, what I'm saying is true and you're the liar. So it's really hard. And I can't tell you how many times It works 95% of the time when we just do what they want us to do or join them in that world. It's amazing when it does work. Interventions we use for the challenges we see. Approach is everything. How you talk, how you act, what you know, being a part of their current world. So if someone thinks it's 1942 and they're 29 years old, by golly, that's where they're going to be, and we're going to be right there with them. And whatever they're thinking, we're going to try to have that conversation and not say, oh no, that's not true, you're wrong. Oftentimes we have people looking for, again, their kids. You know, I got to get out of here. I'm not staying here for dinner. Why would I want to stay here? I'm getting out of here. I got kids waiting for me at home. And we've had to make up stories and tell things and say, you know what, you've paid, money talks, you've paid for dinner. Why don't you sit down and we'll talk about it after dinner? Then we'll go. So that works quite a bit at a time. And then if they want to get home to kids, sometimes we've done things as far as saying, you know what, tell me about your kids. Validate the feelings, because obviously they're missing their kids. But in their mind, their kids might be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 babies. And so we can't say, well, your adult daughter said you have to stay. Well, I don't have an adult daughter. I mean, so in their mind, their kids are little. We have to kind of figure out where are those kids they're talking about and how old are they? So we want to be a part of their current world and how we can work that into our present day. Let them be where they are in the disease process. We're not going to change them. We can't make them go back and be normal again without dementia. We have to accept who they are and where they are. So one of the things that we do see sometimes too frequently is challenging behaviors at Lydia's house. And I guess for me, doing this for so long, I expect behaviors of some sort because of the disease process, and we don't know what the brain is going to do. We have to figure out how we can help them with those behaviors without people getting hurt or themselves getting hurt. It's a constant conversation that we have all the time for certain residents. We want to go slow, establish a routine, limit choices, but give people choices. Don't serve them the same thing all the time, even though you know they love it. People need to still choose. Do you want egg salad or tuna salad or whatever the choices are? Even just 2 choices gives them some kind of control over their world. You want the red blouse or the yellow blouse today? If they can make those decisions. And sometimes they can just point, sometimes they can't do either, or sometimes they'll say, just give me whatever you want. I mean, it's knowing who they are and what they are all about. And so it's, you know, we don't want to rush them through anything. And I know sometimes our days are so hectic and so busy, we just want to hurry and get it done and get rid of go on to the next task. But going slow, getting that routine, talking to them. I know we have a person now who's extremely challenging, although every time I've interacted with them, I have not gotten hit or bitten or kicked or yelled at. I've gotten kissed twice, and I got a hug, and I even got this person to chuckle. So I don't know if it was my approach being good, or their approach being not so good, or because of what my interaction was about. I wasn't doing ADL care. Oh, I did do that once and she didn't hit me. But it's how do we want to interact with them so that we don't want to get hit? I mean, so how do we do that? Pain management, if someone's got a lot of pain, sometimes that's hard to figure out with dementia. So we're getting ready to do a pain presentation for our staff that they have to have. And how do you recognize pain in people with dementia? What kind of a scale can we use so that we recognize that? If someone's got a toothache, that is the worst pain in the whole wide world. And so having a toothache, they're not eating. When someone has bad pain, their demeanor is going to be less than positive. They're going to be a little more crotchety. And so how do we recognize that? How do we deal with that? Maybe we just have to be more on top of that. Redirect or reapproach to avoid confrontation. If someone's cranky, walk away, and somebody else might have to come in, or you just come back in 5 or 10 minutes. Don't push them to the limit of striking out. We don't want to, it's not worth getting hit over not getting a bath. I mean, it can wait. We use ice cream. We go through tons and gallons of ice cream every week because ice cream is kind of magic. It's kind of like music. It's very, very magical. If you can get someone aside and say, you know what? I know where the ice cream is hidden, so come on with me, I'll get you some. And if you've got sprinkles and whipped cream to make it even special, and make them feel special, that you're the only one they're dealing with and talking with right now, and you're the only, just us. I mean, you make it really that kind of special, sometimes that really works, but ice cream is amazing, even to get somebody into the bathtub. Scheduled toileting, getting people on a routine so that they don't have those issues and you're trying to get them to the restroom in a hurry. So helping them to have a scheduled toileting routine. A timeout, not in a negative way, but if they're in a room full of people and it's overwhelming and too stimulating and they're just going nuts and going off and being angry and mad and yelling at everybody, they might need a timeout away from all this stimulus in their room with music they like, or away from this herd of people into a place where it's quiet just for them. One of the benefits, I have to say, over the years, people ask, so what would you change about Lydia's house, or what would you keep the same? And I have to say, our dining situation for us works because our dining room is contained and separate from the rest of the household, so people are in there, and that's all they have is dining. I mean, they don't have all this excess noise from out. So for us, it works really well for them to focus on their food. Again, we want to evaluate environment and remove the triggers that is causing someone to be upset or angry, or remove them from the environment. It could go either way. Activities, what activities can we use that will be a better approach? How can we redirect their thought process for something? And if they're getting cranky or wanting to know where somebody is, and say, you know what, we'll talk to them in a little while, but you know what, come on with me, I've got a seat. I got a seat waiting for you. And not ask them to join you, but say, you know what, we're having a meeting in here and I would like you to join us. And that word really works well with this population, this age, having a meeting. That meeting can be anything. We had, what did we have last week? Something in the kitchen, and I said, we're having a meeting in the kitchen, let's go, I need your help. Oh, it was bingo, nobody would go. And they kept saying, I don't wanna go, I'm not going, nope, nope. They asked them, do you wanna go play bingo? Everybody said no. And so, like 10 minutes later, I went in and I said, you guys aren't doing bingo, what's going on? Well, nobody would come. Okay, so I started telling people, we're having a meeting in the kitchen and I saved you a seat. And I went to everybody I could find, and we got them all in there and they played bingo, and they were fine. And I told them they were gonna win a new car too, but you know. And I use family more often than not. I'll say, your family loves you so much, and I won't say age or whatever, I'll just say, your family loves you so much that they got you a room here for the weekend. And we have a spa, and we explain what that is, and you have free meals, and you're gonna get your hair done and your nails done. Oh my gosh, you are so lucky. I mean, I just build it up. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't if they don't like their family. Or you've raised your kids really, really well. Who doesn't wanna hear really good things about their own children? All of us do. And so when I say things like, oh, you have a daughter, right? Oh my gosh, and I just make it up as I go. She is amazing. You did an amazing job raising her. You did a great job. You should be so proud of her. And that just makes a woman just whew, beam. And your family chose this place for you just for the weekend, or whatever I figure out in the top of my head at the moment. But it's amazing how family most of the time will work. Or your family paid for it. You don't have to pay for anything, or it's free. We had a lady move into Mary's place, and you all know her if I said her name, because she's thus passed on. But when she was moving in, I had to tell her it was only $1,000 a month. Because if I would have told her how much it really cost, oh my gosh, she would have never moved, because she was not happy with the $1,000 a month. But I said, it's only $1,000, and because of you, and I know you and your family, oh my gosh, it's only $1,000 a month. Because she kept asking how much. And she was like, oh, okay. But I mean, that was a total lie. But it didn't upset her in any way, shape, or form. And she held that over my head, how we took all her money to live here. Do not argue or you'll get what you deserve. So arguing does not solve anything. If you're gonna argue with a resident, expect to get hit. If they've got your jacket on or your sweater on and you want it back, you better have something to exchange. Because if you don't, and you say, give me my jacket, they don't know it's yours. In their mind, it's their jacket. So you gotta wait till they get tired of it, or you can pretend you're cold and maybe they'll give it to you. But don't leave it laying around. That's happened to me, and it has come back with food all over it. So that's not a good thing. And then again, therapeutic fibbing, whatever way that works for you, and you have to feel confident in what you're saying and how you're doing it. It's amazing how well it can get certain things done. We had a resident, I keep using these wonderful stories, who slept in a big double bed, and every morning her bed was wet. So the staff would go in her room in the morning and they would kind of jump on her bed and go, oh, time to get up. Guess what? Guess what happened? And she would kind of wake up and say, the kids were here, the kids were here. And we knew she loved children. That was her passion. The kids were here, they brought squirt guns, and we all got wet. And they got your bed wet. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can I help you get out of it so we can clean it up? It worked every time. It was amazing how that worked for her. Doesn't work for everybody, but for her it worked. Or we'd use a ceiling leak last night. We got to call maintenance because the bed got wet. I am sorry again. I mean, there's all kind of things you can think of to help them believe what you're saying, and then the end result is that we want to get you up and get you changed, but we're not going to say you wet the bed. That's very, that's not dignified. So therapeutic is amazing. Do not startle a resident. Get in front of them, kind of make contact with them from a little ways away, just so they can kind of see you, and then kind of go in slowly so that it's okay for you to approach them. Use a soothing tone, a softer voice, not a loud voice, not a fast voice like I have. So when I go in there, I have to come right down because they get really worked up really fast. They need to have someone who's really quiet and soft-spoken. Do not touch a physically aggressive resident because you all know what would happen. You need to get them to a safe place so they can be mad wherever they are. And redirect somebody who's not in the right place with something startling like, oh, you have a phone call. John, you've got a phone call. Come on over here. And by the time they get way over there, oh, they must have hung up. I'm really sorry, but let's have some ice cream. But they got out of where they weren't supposed to be. And if agitation persists, you want to come back later. You don't want to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. That would irritate any of us. Wrong button. If need help, allow one other person to take over and you get out. Good cop, bad cop. We play that all day long sometimes. I've been a good cop and I've been the bad cop. I've had to lock myself in an office because a resident was chasing me. He was so mad at me. But it makes sense if you're the bad cop right now, by golly, you could just say, someone else can come in and say, you know what, let's get her out of here. You know what, I'll help you. Go away. And you just got to play the game. And next day, you might be the good cop. Ask them for help. A lot of times, you can ask them to help you with whatever it is. I don't know how to do this. You have to play dumb sometimes. Can you show me or tell me what you would do? Ask them to show you if they can't verbally communicate it. You can, have them grab your arm and say, well, show me what you're talking about. They can take you. Validate the feelings behind the words, because sometimes when they want to go home, what are they really talking about? What are those feelings behind those words? What are they trying to say? So we want to validate and make sure that we are connecting with them. If someone's really tearful, we're not going to sit them over there and say, you know what, sit down and have some ice cream, you'll be fine. We want to connect and say, what's wrong? I see that you're sad. You want to tell me about it? And they might have a story. It might be real, it might not be real. Positive reinforcement comments. Always when someone comes back from the beauty shop, oh my gosh, your hair. Did you do that today? It looks amazing. That really goes a long way. You look so good in that color. That's a nice color for you, Louise. Oh, you look great. That just beams them up. And for the men as well, not just the women. And we can use language from their era, like dapper. They know what dapper means. They know those old words. Rescue and take the blame, and sometimes you just got to say, you know what, I did it. I am so sorry. And a lot of times they'll say, it's okay, sweetie. And a lot of times they might not, but a lot of times they might blame you more. But a lot of times if you just take the blame, our shoulders are bigger than theirs, and we can take that blame all day long because we know it's not real. You know what, I did that. I am so sorry. I was trying to keep your clothes safe, so I shoved them all in your drawer. What do we want the end result to be when we're trying to validate an approach and have a better approach? We want to have a positive interaction. We want them to not have negative feelings about the interaction because they'll carry those around with our face. So in nutritional interventions, colored plates, one of the things in our rules is we have to have opposite colored and different colored plates for dining. We can't have all white plates and all white cups, and we have to have a contrast in everything. So, and we don't overload the table with stuff. Sometimes less is better, just a bowl and a spoon. That's all they can handle. And as they get older, people's vision, especially with dementia, it gets smaller and smaller. So when they're looking down, all they can see is like right here. It's kind of like binocular vision. And so they have very limited vision of what's on the table, and they may not see all this other stuff. We want to promote a pleasant, calm, social, and enjoyable mealtime. We don't want to have a lot of noise going on. And when we're talking or sitting with them, we want to be talking with them, not with our friend over here and talking back and forth when they're right here, which is, I think, that's taught in the CNA class anyway, or most trainings. Maintain stability of the environment, seating and seating partners if that works for them. For a lot of times, they look forward to those seats and will kick somebody else out if they're in the wrong seat. Sometimes we can change and it's not a big deal. Adequate adaptive devices. We have been using, I can't tell you how many scoop plates in the last year we've added to our collection of plates just because people are having a harder time eating, and heavier utensils for some. Appropriate meals in terms of texture, food, preferences, snacks, amounts, and supplements. I remember a time when we would have a lot of men spitting all over the kitchen floor. Just, I mean, it was disgusting. And we finally figured out it was salad. The texture of the food was just disgusting for them. They couldn't figure out what it was. It's kind of when you have a cold and when you eat, you can't tell what you're eating because the texture is just odd. But we've had people, spit their food out, but we try to provide it in a way that fits their need and that they can eat it. Residents sits where they will best be successful, and sometimes that's facing the wall, just because all these people are distracting me and I can't eat. So if I face the wall, I just have my food, and then they're successful. And if you have to do that in like an assisted living, then maybe they shouldn't be in assisted living, because that kind of everybody's starting to talk about them. Provide appropriate amount of assistance and supervision during meals without promoting too much dependence. If we can make a food into a sandwich form, whatever we're eating, and they can eat it, perfect. That's being independent. Monitor and observe intake. We do that because at the end stage of Alzheimer's disease, people start to lose weight, so we really track our weight well. Always use dessert if that's all they're going to eat. We had a lady once who lived here who only ate Oreo cookies for like 6 months. 6 months, only Oreo cookies. And it was just like, wow. And we went through a lot of Oreo cookies. Provide various fluids for the course of the day. Provide good oral care, mouth care. It's hard to find if someone has a toothache, though. It's difficult to assess sometimes. Physical environment, you want to reduce the excess noise, because if there was a lot of noise excess going on in here, it would make me crazy, but you wouldn't be able to hear or concentrate. And same with the folks we care for. That noise coming in, and for some people with dementia, any kind of noise literally hurts their head, and they have to live in an environment that is completely silent because they can't stand any kind of noise. Appropriate temperature, lighting, more lighting the better. We have lighting regs now. Provide safety and security, individualize their environment. They can bring their own furniture, their own stuff. And it's great in the beginning, but toward the end, they don't really have a clue of what's theirs and what somebody else's. Increase personal space if possible. Add comfort things such as dolls and stuffed animals. Comfortable chairs and recliners are like magic, as you all know. Quiet space, and then we change it up as needed. Okay, so this is some new research that I just threw in here. Oh, I got time. Last week, they're looking at the retina of the eye to do more early diagnosis. So the thinner your retina is, the increased prognosis of Alzheimer's disease. So that's kind of an interesting test. And then stress and brain shrinkage. We all know how stress can impact our lives, but the higher your stress level, the more your brain can shrink, so don't get stressed out. The higher the cortisol levels, the more the brain can shrink. So yoga on Tuesdays is in this room. There's a link between chronic inflammation and a higher risk of the ApoE4 gene, which everybody has ApoE4 genes, but if you have two, your chances are greater of getting Alzheimer's disease. A new drug therapy that reverses memory deficits and stops Alzheimer's disease is, they're doing it, working on it in animals. So it's proven to be non-toxic to humans. So they haven't really started the human test yet, but that will be kind of cool. And the other one, which we're hearing more and more stuff, how important what we eat is and how important our gut health is. And so they're seeing now a link to how healthy your gut is to how healthy your brain is. So we got to start eating better. So those are some things that I've found new on the horizon. So what is one thing that you can do, think about it, differently to help your residents? So something that, just for you personally, what can you do one thing differently in your world to help them? And that is it. Ooh, I'm 5 minutes early. Wow, I talk fast. Questions on the questions?